Hyde in college. So about 3 years ago, I was at a book signing, and a parent came up to me, and she said, "I don't want to be offensive." Okay, when someone says that, that's dangerous, okay? They said, "I don't want to be offensive, but what's that?
Translation.
Oh, okay.
No, don't wait. Please go on. Please go on.
Just talk slower.
Please go
Just
on.
talk slower.
Yes.
Okay. So this parent comes up to me and says, "I don't want to be offensive, but all I can get my kid to read is this fantasy stuff. How do I get them to read real literature?" Okay, now, I write fantasy and science fiction. I write really weird books, okay? Wizards and knights and people flying around. They're awesome, but they're weird. And this parent is like, "I want my kid to read Milton. I want my kid to read Shakespeare." And instead they're reading you. Is there any way I can get them to read what I want them to read? Now, this experience kind of triggered something inside of me because it relates to how I was as a kid. Unlike a lot of writers, I was not a reader when I was young. I'm one of these kids that you guys are talking about that you need to get reading, because when I was young, I hated books. It seemed to me that every time someone would give me a book, it'd have like some shiny award on the cover, and it would be about a boy with a pet dog, and then his dog would die, and then the book would end. I hated these books. They were boring. I thought that I hated all books. This happened for me until I was in 8th grade. And I had a teacher whose name was, I kid you not, her name was Ms. Reader. Ms. Reader. And Ms. Reader was my teacher, and she knew that I was a bad reader. In fact, I shouldn't admit this, I was lying on my book reports. I would read the back of the book, and I'd read the first chapter, and I'd make something up. And she figured out I was doing this. So she called me up after class, and she said, "Brandon, I know you're making stuff up." I'm like, "What? No, of course not." She said, "No, I know you are. I think you're reading way below your level. I want you to read better." And she took me to the back of the room, and teachers have these things. They're like these racks of paperback books that have been read by 1 million students. They've got like pizza stains on them and stuff, right? She took me to her rack of old books, and she said, "I want you to read one of these, because these are books that I have read recently and that I like, and your book report is going to be us talking about this book." A really good teacher. This was a teacher who was invested in me. You want to know how to get kids to read? I say we need literacy professionals. We need librarians, teachers, and parents who are invested in their kids' reading, who take the time to set them aside and they show off their excitement for reading. We sorted through these books, and I arrived on one. Honestly, I picked it up because it had a dragon and a pretty girl on the cover. My two requirements, I suppose. It was called Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hamlin. And I took this book, and I fell in love. It changed my entire life. Everything about this book was wondrous to me. I got done with this book. I went back to my teacher and I said, "I can't believe that people write books like this." She said, "There are a lot of books like this. Let's go to the library, this place you've been ignoring, and do some research and pick out some other books." Now, here's the thing. This book should not have worked. This book, Dragon's Bane, is about a middle-aged woman is the main protagonist. That shouldn't have worked, right, for a teenage boy? All the books for teenage boys are about teenage boys. This was about a middle-aged woman who had been told she could be the greatest sorceress who'd ever lived by her master. He said, if you learn magic, you will be wonderful at it. But she also had a family. And she had always divided her time between her family and her magic. It's really a book about a woman trying to choose between her career and her family in the form of a fantasy novel. This shouldn't have worked for a teenage boy, but it did. Why did it? And I think this is the other big point I want to make about getting kids interested in reading. It was, I want to check my time here. It was the sense of wonder. A sense of wonder. This is why we read. This is why we go places in books, for the sense to explore, to go someplace new, and to learn. And I think that in our societies these days, we often downplay the importance of a sense of wonder. We beat it out of our adults. We say, you need to do things that are real. Just like this teacher, or this parent who came to me and said, I want my kid to be reading books that are real, rather than books that are made up. I grew passionate about books because of this fantasy novel. And it sounds silly to say that a fantasy novel changed my life, but it did. I decided I wanted to be a writer. That mere decision made me realize I have to do well in school because I need to learn how to write. I've got to be learned. I went from a C student to an A student in 1 year because of books. This is the power of books. And I'll tell you what the other power is. So, my mother graduated first in her class in accounting in a year when she was the only woman in the accounting program. Okay? She was offered a prestigious scholarship to go on and get a master's degree, a CPA. She instead had me, and she stayed home with me as a young child. She felt this was very important for the family. Now, I had heard this story before, and I always thought, of course she did. I'm me. I'm awesome. You're a teenager. You think these things. Of course she stayed home. But in reading this book about this woman choosing between magic, which is something awesome, and her family, I understood my mother better. I read a silly fantasy book, and I understood my mother better. This is the power of books. This is the power of a sense of wonder. We can get inside other people's heads and understand them better through fiction than anything else. And I think if we work to preserve this sense of wonder in our kids, if we teach them to love to explore, they will naturally look to read books by people different from themselves. They will explore the world and they will come to understand the world. And this is the best thing I sincerely feel that we can do for creating a world where we try harder to understand one another, is by teaching kids to love literature. So, that's my point. A sense of wonder. Don't abandon it. Don't forget it. Don't beat it out of the kids. Keep them exploring. Thank you.